Uh, Hi, am I visible and is my audio audible? Okay. So, so this is the tutorial session for week 7. And before we move on to the slideshow, I would like to ask if anybody has any doubts of any of the previous quizzes or anything you want to discuss or about this week's lectures. If you guys have any doubts, we can discuss them. No doubts. Everything is crystal clear. So, should I begin with today's presentation? If there are no doubts. Yes, no. Should I start the presentation or do you guys want to ask me something? Okay. So, okay, this is the seventh tutorial for the course Wildlife Ecology. I am Geetika Agarwal. I'm a PhD scholar at Center for Ecological Sciences. And yeah, let's begin today's tutorial session. If you have any doubts, you can stop me in between and ask me. So, the topics that were covered in this week were mostly about biogeography, distribution of animals or organisms in general, about some push and pull factors, and about why species are found where they are found. So, we will begin by defining what is biogeography. So, can you guys tell me what is biogeography? Since the entire week's lectures were discussing biogeography, you might know by now what it means. Okay, so you're correct, Rajeshri. The study of geographical distribution of life on Earth. That is correct. And we also look at the various, yes, geographical distribution of organisms and the reason behind it. Exactly. So we also look at the various reasons behind the patterns that we observe about why some of the species are found in only certain specific areas. Is it because of the temperature or the precipitation or such environmental factors of that area, or is it because it is being you know interacting with other species of that area and it is not a good fit in that area, and that is why it is being driven away from that particular area. So we look at all these things. We look at, okay, so we look at various on various levels. You look at continental biogeography, you look at islands, oceans, you look at mountains, you look at freshwater systems, all these things. And biogeography also covers how different species they occupy certain areas over space and time. So what are the certain regions that they're covering, and also how is this changing over time? So even over evolutionary time, you're looking at how certain species are present in this area or why they've gone extinct in certain specific areas. So if you talk about Indian biogeography, for example, so there are many factors that govern how these species that you find in India today have reached here. As you would know, earlier India was a part of Gondwana land, and the entire Earth landmass was one single landmass, huge landmass called Pangea. Are you both aware of that? That to begin with, very far back in the past, the entire landmass, we didn't have all these different continents. It was one huge landmass which was called Pangea. And then because of tectonic movements, all of these different continents they broke away. And then still for some time, India was a part of Gondwana land, which also consisted of South America, Africa, Madagascar, and the Indian subcontinent. And then from there, the Indian subcontinent broke apart and it started its journey towards Asia, and eventually it collided with Asia, and that is how the Himalayas, yeah, the continental drift, and that is how the Himalayan mountains have formed and come up. So across all these different things that was happening in the Indian landmass, how are the different species distributed? Were they already there from the very beginning when India was a part of the Gondwana land, or did they emerge while India was like drifting towards Asia? Or did they come after India had collided with Asia and they've come from different parts of Asia, say other regions of Southeast Asia? All of this is what people study in when they talk about biogeography. It just depends on what specifically are they looking at. So moving on to another thing is the range of a species. So what is the range of a species? Or how do you define the range of a particular species of organisms? The area where the organism is distributed. Exactly correct, Afia. So the range of a species is basically, yes, you're also correct. So the range of the species is basically the distribution of the species, what is the area that the species covers, and or what all areas can that species cover. Basically, if you don't have a species only in one particular region, you have different populations distributed in different areas. So all this would come under the ranges of the species, because even if these populations are far apart from each other, but the species is the same. So all of the geographical areas that particular species can be found in will be called the range of that species. And talking about this, so can you tell me what are the various processes that governs where a species is found and where it is not? So here I'm talking more about like the environmental and the other aspect of the factors that govern where a species is found and where it's not. The species distributions, basically. So I'll tell you, okay, so I'm talking about the abiotic and the biotic factors. Yes, there are push and pull factors as well, and that is how they are categorized. But what are the various abiotic and the biotic factors that govern how a species is present in an area? Temperature, soil type, exactly. Will be moisture. Yeah, and what would be some biotic factors that happen to affect the species distribution? Disease, food resource, predators, allelopathy. Okay, so you both are pretty clear about this. So, um, all right. So the current distribution of the so that will come in the next slide. I would just like to that the various processes that govern species distribution, the current distribution of extant taxa, extant basically means the organisms that are found right now on the planet. So it is governed by intrinsic factors as well that depends on the species biology, and so that would be in which temperatures is the species found, what is the moisture level can it handle, what type of nutrients does it require. So that would be the species biology, and the or it would also be like if it's a fast running species, it would be most likely to be found in grasslands. If it's a tree dwelling species, it would, or an arboreal species, you will find it in forests and things like that. And in extrinsic factors would be the presence of competitors and the suitable habitat. These are the things that is the external factors that are going to govern it. So the reasons or that affect it is what I was looking at the answer for. So there are biotic as well as abiotic factors. Biotic factors, as you guys pointed out, these are the species interactions, the interactions of these particular species with other species or with the community in general. So what, how are the resources in that area, what is the amount of prey that you can find, and what are the predators, what are the things you have to escape in that area. And also importantly, the presence of competitors, because interspecific competition very strongly governs where a species is distributed. Because if in one particular area that species faces a strong interspecific competition, it can likely get excluded from that area and will have to occupy some other area. Or otherwise, what can happen is if it's facing a very strong interspecific competition for a particular niche, it might just alter its niche and start living in the same area but occupying a different niche. And the abiotic factors, as you said, would be the temperature, the water, the amount of precipitation in that area, the amount of sunlight that area is receiving, which would consequently uh, control the amount of the productivity of that area, which would fall under the resources factor. So, okay, moving on, the ways in which these factors are categorized. So, as you mentioned earlier, these are the push and the pull factors. So, basically, the push factors are the factors that push a certain species away from a particular geographical location, and the pull factors will be the factors that will be pulling the species towards a particular geographical location. So, can you give me a few examples for a push or pull factors? This should be very simple for you by now. So, what would be some examples of push factors and pull factors? Okay, disease, predators, competition can be pull factors. Ayusha or Afia? Ah, yeah, push factors, yes. So, the disease, the predators, and the competition, these will be some push factors that will drive you away from a particular area. If there is a high number of predators in that particular area, you would want to avoid that area and go occupy some other region that has a low amount of competition and low amount of predators. And pull factors would be some good climatic conditions, some nice nutrient rich soil, or things that like help you survive in that area and help you avoid predation, competition, and all these things. Okay, so why do you think are species limited to certain particular locations? And what are the factors behind this? There were two things that were discussed, two keywords that were discussed in the lecture. The things that limit or allow a species to occupy certain particular locations but not others. Do you guys recall what that was, or can you tell me what are some reasons that the species is limited to a particular area? Because they're adapted to that conditions, that is correct. Limiting factors and tolerance. Yes, you are okay. You are also on the correct path, Rajeshri. I think you're talking about the Liebig's law and the other law about your tolerance ranges. What I am talking about here is about the dispersal and the anthropogenic factors. Basically, why a species can be limited to a particular area could be because, like, if it is able to survive in other areas as well, but it is limited to this particular one, it could be because it has not dispersed out of that area, it is not moved out of that area yet. Or it could be why it has not moved out, it could be about because of other reasons, that maybe it is very new to this particular area, so it has not had the time to explore the region or to move out to other areas. Another thing could be because it thinks that the other area is inhospitable. And it has not been able to migrate to that area, or like to move to that area. And the third thing could be that there is a barrier that prevents it from dispersing into the other hospitable areas where it could potentially survive but cannot reach. And human activities or the anthropogenic factors could be things like deforestation. If you're cutting down the forests, then potentially that organism could have been in that area, but the humans have altered it in such a way that it can no longer survive there. Okay. And the things you're talking about are also correct. Limiting factors, if that law basically states that if there are multiple resources that you require, or there are multiple factors that are governing a species presence in a particular area, the limiting factor would be the one that is the lowest in quantity. Basically, like it was explained in the lecture, if you require certain things in like different quantities, but in the environment they're only present in a limiting quantity, so the one resource that is present in the lowest amount would be the limiting factor. And the tolerance would be the range of your tolerance. Basically, how we also talked about in the last tutorial about the niches, or about specialist and generalist species. So the range of tolerance for a generalist species would be very wide. It can survive under very different types of moisture conditions or temperature conditions and such. But for a specialist species, it will be a very narrow range of tolerance. So all these factors also govern how a species is distributed and where it is found. Now, can you tell me what is habitat selection? Or what do you mean by habitat selection? Or when a species is preferring a certain habitat? Actually, I've given away the answer in a way. So, what is habitat selection? Anyone? Okay, so habitat selection basically is a behavioral response. It results in the disproportionate use of different habitats. So basically, as I said, you are preferring certain particular habitats over other habitats. That is called habitat selection, and that could be because of either because of the behavior of that organism, or it could be like genetically incorporated in that organism, like that behavior has a genetic component and is being passed on over generations. Some basic examples would be like a bird or an insect species which is preferring certain plant species to lay their eggs on. This could be either because behaviorally they prefer those particular tree species or plant species because they feel that their eggs are safer in that tree species for predator avoidance, or it could be a genetic factor. For example, in certain insects, they lay their eggs on plant species that have a toxic component or a toxin in their leaves, which when their larvae feed on these species, they become impalatable by other predators, and that is how they avoid predation. So if that particular species lays their eggs on this particular plant which is toxic, like which has this toxin in its leaves or in its chemicals, it can produce this chemical. The larvae, as growing up, they will feed on these leaves and they can accumulate these toxins in their body, and this will help the insect when it becomes an adult to avoid predation, because the predators will not eat or feed on these particular insects because they are toxic in nature. And could also be mosquitoes when they are choosing which ponds to lay their eggs in. So when these insects like mosquitoes or dragonflies, they actually sample, they move from different ponds and they look at these puddles of water, and they look at what is the amount of eggs that are present in that particular water resource, how many eggs are there, what is the crowding situation, how many larvae are, like how many, if there are more eggs then there will be larval crowding when all of them hatch together. And if there are very few eggs, then they may not survive either because there are very few larvae in that pond. And they'll also look at what is the presence of predators in that particular pond, what is the presence of, say, frogs in that area, and all those things. They sample these things, and then they select which particular area to uh, live in, or which particular area to prefer over the other ones. Okay, so moving on to what is migration, why birds come to the same species of plants, you're asking. So sometimes some birds prefer, for example, if you're talking about barbets, do you know about the bird species that are barbets? Okay, yes, you're aware. So barbets basically, as you would know, they prefer to nest in holes of trees, right? And not every tree has these specific holes. Like in the bark of the tree, there will be a hole inside in which they lay their eggs, and they'll stay inside that hole the entire time while they are, uh, while they are looking after or caring for their eggs. So these barbets, they will prefer certain particular tree species which will have, say, high, the height of the hole should be at a particular level so that they can avoid other predators. Or they would prefer trees that have a high, leaf density so that they can avoid other brood parasites or things like that, or other birds coming in and poking at their eggs and such things. And for example, there are these birds called drongos. They also prefer, so they are known to actually come back to the same tree. So this particular drongo called the racket-tailed drongo, it's known to come back to the same tree year after year for laying its eggs. So what they do is they choose a tree for which the canopy, it does not touch any other tree, so that they avoid arboreal predators like snakes or things like that that can transfer from tree to tree. Second thing is that they will prefer the same tree. They will come back to it year after year. And what they do is, after laying their eggs, after getting a successful brood of eggs, they will break their nest so that they leave no traces behind that this tree was used in the previous year for laying eggs, and a successful uh, it had a successful year. It had successfully hatched its eggs and the fledglings had gone out. So they do all these sorts of things, the birds, and they choose some particular tree species because they prefer nesting in that because of the height of the tree, or because of how is the tree shaped, the tree cover, it's camouflaging them from other species and all these things. And other species like these birds that use leaves and such things, they might prefer depending on which leaves they use for incorporating in their nest. So is that okay? Okay, so what is migration? Yeah, it's the regular movement of animals from one geographical area to another, and they follow usually the same route. You're entirely correct. You've given me the definition. They move regularly from season after season. It's seasonal movement, and they follow fixed routes. The purpose of it could be to finding better resources, or to avoid a harsh climate in their particular region where they were found, and now move to an amiable climate. So mostly you would be aware that species, they migrate from colder climates in Central Asia towards India and other tropical countries, either to avoid the harsh winters or to breed in these resource rich areas, right? So now we'll look at, there are many bird species actually which migrate through India or migrate to India, and we'll look at some of these examples to just, you know yeah, bar-headed geese, rosy starling, correct. These are some species that migrate through India. So we'll discuss some of these species. So you might be aware of the Amur falcon, which, it's a raptor species. It does not migrate, like, does not stay in India, but it migrates through India. So this is how the bird looks. And these are some places in India where it's found. In the winter, it can be found in certain, along the western coast of southern India. And while passing through, it's mostly found in Nagaland and in eastern parts of India. So while migrating, the Amur falcon, it covers a very huge distance of 22,000 kilometers. It's one of the longest distance in the bird migrations, and it mostly migrates to southern Africa, and India just falls in its way because it starts its migration from eastern parts of Asia, and it crosses India. It stops in Nagalands and parts of Assam and Mizoram here while passage, and it flies over the Arabian Sea and it reaches southern Africa. This species is known, it's basically an insectivorous bird, and it's known to feed on insects while midair during its flight. Okay, and yeah, I will show you this GIF of its migration. And can you see? Is the screen visible? So here you can see this is made by Bird Count of India, and they have taken the data from eBird sampling, and this is how it shows. These are the months: January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. And when this bar moves along this graph, you can see where the bird is found in these different parts. So in the winters, you can see it's found in India and in South Africa in the winters, and in March it moves back to these parts of Eastern Asia, and then you can see it passaging through India, concentrating in Nagaland and in Western Coast, and then moving again to South Africa. So yeah, this is how this interesting migration happens. So going to the next one, I was going to talk about the demosil crane. It is one of the small sized crane species. Its scientific name is Anthropoidus virgo. It is like found in huge numbers in this place called Khicham village of Rajasthan. And its migration route, it is traveling mostly from its breeding grounds in Eurasia, and it comes here in late September. The first flocks, they take their flights. They start flying from the plateaus and from the wetlands, from the steppes, which are found in Mongolia and in the Caucasus region. They also cover a very long distance. They cover a distance of around 5,000 kilometers, and they cover it in 2 weeks. And they fly across all these, even to across these high Himalayan mountain ranges. And by November, a lot of them have reached the Khicham village, which has now been started calling the Crane village. And people in this village, they welcome these cranes, and some of them they call the local name of this crane is, I think, Karuj or Kuraj, something like that, Kuraj maybe. And people have even started naming their children after this crane. Yeah, it's called Courage. And so in this news article, it was said that the village elder is saying that some of their songs and even their legends are about this bird, which is named Courage, and the families have started even naming their children after it. And in the earlier times, hundreds of birds came each season, and the villagers there in the Kicham village, they feed them. They get up early in the morning and they feed these cranes, and now they've started getting them in huge numbers because of this feeding ritual that the people there follow. And again, you can see, we're going to look at the GIF that shows us the distribution of this particular crane across the world in different across the year. So you can see the wintering grounds here are in Rajasthan mostly and some parts of Gujarat, and it moves back around March to these Central Asia and to some parts of Europe, and it comes back to India during the winters for the to avoid the extreme cold climate that is faced in the Central Asia. Okay, so the third one and the last one, as you mentioned, is the rosy. This is the last one I'm going to talk about. This is the rosy starling. This is how it looks. It has this red patches on its front and on its back as well. They are a gregarious species. They live in groups, and they're also open to living with other species of mynas, which are also like closely related to these starlings. And when they are found, they even roost with the other species of mynas and with their and in also their own groups. So they're found in huge numbers, and their scientific name is Pastor roseus. And you can see they're found in huge numbers in winter in India. from like almost entirety of India except for the eastern part and for the Himalayan ranges. They are found entirely in all parts of southern India, in Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan, and some parts of this central India. So, in the entire global population of the rosy starling, it comes and winters in the Indian subcontinent. It breeds in Central and West Asia, in certain parts of Europe as well, and it begins moving towards India in early July and August, and it even passes through Ladakh. And you can also see, you would have seen these murmuration videos of starlings that are posted on YouTube that are found in Europe, but you can also find these spectacular murmurations in Gujarat and in central India during winter when these rosy starlings are here for their in India as their wintering grounds. And as you can read here, they fly from East Europe to central parts of India. They are found in states of Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, many parts of Andhra Pradesh. So they cover like almost the entire of India. And again, we'll move on to look at how it looks, how the distribution looks across the year. So you can see mostly in the summers, they're found in the winters, they come in India and they stay here starting from August to around March. In March, they start moving back, and till August, they'll be found in Europe and in Central Asia. Okay. So it's not just birds that migrate, even though birds are very famous for their migrations because they do it over very long distances. But even insects like butterflies and dragonflies, mm, uh, they also move and migrate seasonally. So I am gonna show you some examples of that. There is this butterfly which is called the crimson rose butterfly, which migrates across the sea from India to Sri Lanka. So this is a science magazine which is called Mongabay India, and this was one article by them where I've taken this information from. So you can look at these butterflies. These are called crimson rose because you can see how they have these red patches on them. And when they're migrating, like they migrate in huge numbers, hundreds of them, they move together. And these crimson rose butterfly, they belong to the swallowtail family of butterflies. Basically, you can see here, maybe it's clear in the image, you can see the swallowtails. Is it visible to everybody? Like, can you see here in this area? They have these pointy tails. That is why they're called swallowtails. They are very large in size and they lay their eggs in the Indian plant, the Indian birthwort plant, or similar plants, which are, as I explained, they're known to contain a toxic substance. And the butterfly larvae, they're gonna feed on this toxin from the plant. They're gonna sequester or they're gonna accumulate this toxin in their body, and that is why they're going to be inedible to the predators. And this striking coloration is a form of aposematism. You might be aware of this term. Aposematism is when organisms, they have striking colors so as to communicate to the predators that they are impalatable, you cannot eat them. So they're making them visible, which you would think is a way in which they are, it's making them visible to the predators. They can spot them very easily. But these striking colors, they send out a message to the predators that you cannot eat me. I am toxic. I am impalatable. So there are high contrast red markings on the black wings, and it's the nature's take on the danger sign. So they are known to migrate from Tamil Nadu in southern India to the Mannar in Sri Lanka, which is not a very huge distance. It's 25 kilometers away. But for a butterfly, you can think of it, it's a big distance. Okay. So, the next butterflies that I'm going to be talking about are mostly the milkweed butterflies. So, this is an article from the Hindu. So, studies on migration patterns of milkweed butterflies and their feeding habitats can help protect them. So, a lot of researchers now are paying. So, earlier, this is a within India migration. It is not across countries. These butterflies, they migrate within India. And earlier researchers did not pay much attention to butterfly migrations because these are like small insects. Or but now it has come to attention, and a lot of people have been working on this lately. And this is called the blue tiger, this is called the monarch. These are called milkweed butterflies because they lay their eggs on these plants which are called milkweeds. And these butterflies, they mostly migrate between the eastern and the western ghats. So after facing the southwest monsoon, the milkweed butterflies, they migrate westward from the eastern ghats to the western ghats, and here they become active upon their arrival to the western ghats. So most of them between October and April, these butterflies, they congregate in large numbers in the western ghats in specific sites during winter and the dry seasons. Here they breed in the mountains, they lay their eggs, and after these eggs hatch, the progeny, it migrates back to the eastern plains in the April and July in the following year. So basically, the adults, they migrate from the eastern ghats to the western ghats. They lay their eggs, and the progeny that will hatch out from these eggs will migrate back to the eastern ghats. So this is a within India example of migration. So moving on, let's talk about how is this recorded. So a lot of people, so there are these famous people in NCBS. There's this researcher named Krishnamekh Kunte. His entire lab actually works on butterfly migrations. So what they do is they now that we are aware of these butterflies that are migrating, they go out to the field in that particular season in which they know that they will find the butterflies, and they carry out this sampling. They're either in the various sampling methods that we discussed. That is how they keep a track of how many butterflies are left and how are they moving from year to year. They'll either set up various different traps to like count the number of butterflies that are moving, or what they will do is they'll go to these trees species that they know that they will lay their eggs on, and they can sample how many eggs are being laid each year. And to note the migration process, you can go to these specific sites during the season in which the migration is happening, and you will see huge amounts, thousands of these butterflies that will be flying across the forest at that time. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about dispersal. And can you tell me what is dispersal and how is it different from migration? What do we mean by dispersal and how is it different from migration? This should be pretty easy. We've already discussed what is dispersal. So, anybody would like to answer that? Yeah, migration involves your return to the original habitat, and it is a seasonal thing. It happens at regular intervals of time. So, what is, on the other hand, what is dispersal? Okay, dispersal. It's not exactly random, but yeah, dispersal is basically moving out from your current habitat, and they for dispersal you don't really the organisms don't really need to have the intention of returning to this habitat. They just disperse out from their initial habitat, from the place of birth, or if it's in a case of a plant, so from where the parent species is, the seeds are going to get dispersed, and they're going to reach a new habitat, or they're going to colonize a new area, and they're going to survive, and they're going to start living there after that. It can either be to avoid competition from the pre-existing species in that area. Yes, the species is expanding their range. That is also correct. So you're gonna get out from your initially occupied area so that you avoid competition from conspecifics that are found in that area, and now you'll colonize a new area. And these new areas, they cannot keep on expanding their range forever. But what will happen is, it might be intuitive. If it's a certain tiger species and they're moving out to new areas for dispersal, eventually the tigers that were occupying the initial ranges, they will die off, and that territory will be open up for taking up by another individual. Or you can go to a certain occupied territory, you can fight that particular individual and occupy their territory and drive them out of their home range. They might then be somebody who will just have to move around without having a particular territory, or they will probably stay as a subordinate in your territory. Okay, so and how is it? And it's not just these big animals like tigers or lions that have territories, but even certain birds have territories. And why would they have territories? Would be because, say, it's a resource rich area. Say there's a tree, say we're talking about, for example, like a sunbird who depends on flowers for nectars. So why would they maintain a territory? It could be because this particular, it's a small area which is resource rich patch. It's a particular tree which is in full bloom, and there are so many flowers, and protecting that tree as a territory would be actually useful that to that particular individual, because it is going to attract mates for it, and it can, hoard that entire resource for itself. And how is it different from migration? As Afia said, that migration is seasonal, but dispersal is only going to happen once. So what are the three different types of dispersals? Diffusion, which is a gradual movement over generations. Jump dispersal, quick movement over large distances across unsuitable terrain. Secular diffusion, evolutionary times. Correct. You are entirely correct. So these are what are the three different types of dispersal. One is a jump dispersal, where you avoid the in between patch of unsuitable habitat and you move from one suitable area to another suitable area. And that will be a jump dispersal. Diffused, it is a gradual movement which is happening over generations. For example, in like we were talking about occupying different territories in tigers. So there is a tigress which is with its own territory, and then there are the cubs that will move out. So that is happening over generations. It has its own territory. The cubs will have different territories, and their progeny will have different territories. That will be a diffused sort of a uh, dispersal. And there is secular dispersal, which is going to happen over evolutionary times. Okay, so let's come to allelopathy. Can you guys tell me what is allelopathy? You must be aware of this term. It was discussed even during the week and also before that. It's a push factor. That is correct. But what is it? Like, how does it happen? Okay, so allelopathy basically is a phenomena in which an organism, which is most commonly a plant or some microorganisms, they release biochemicals, and these biochemicals they influence the germination of seeds in case of plants. They influence the growth, the survival, and the reproduction of the other organisms. It can be to impact conspecifics, or it can be to impact heterospecifics. Both of these are possible. So, why do you think would plants want to, drive away conspecifics from their area? Like, what is the harm to a big grown tree to in letting the saplings of its own saplings to, grow in the same area or nearby? Competition for resources, correct. So eventually when the sapling is going to grow up, it's going to compete for resources with the big old tree. So it does not want to face that, it does not want to face a competition. So these trees, they have these certain biochemicals that get exuded out from their roots, which impact or which they hamper the growth of their own seedlings. And this can very well be used in agriculture nowadays. If you want to avoid certain specific weeds, you can find other particular plant species that might be producing these chemicals, or you can just extract the chemicals from these plants and you can spray them to the soil, and that is going to prevent the weed growth in that particular area, and you can get high yields of your um, crops. Is that okay? Moving on, let's discuss about one of the habitats, very famous habitats of India, which is the Western Ghats. So you all might be aware of where the Western Ghats is found. It's basically starts here in the near Gujarat. It covers it starts from the Satpura range in the north, somewhere here in Maharashtra. It goes across these areas of Goa. It covers all of the western coast. From it goes past Goa, it goes through Karnataka, Kerala, through Maharashtra, and it stops here in the last part, which is it has some coverage in Tamil Nadu. It also, and it stops where India stops, which is in Kanyakumari. And this area, as you might be aware, is one of the famous biodiversity hotspots because it has a huge number of species which are endemic to this particular uh, mountain range. And that is because the climatic and the other, like the forests that are found in this area, are not found anywhere else. The temperature, the moisture levels, the monsoon factor, all of these things are unique to the Western Ghats. And there are certain species that are found in this area which will not be able to move out or survive. They're specialized to the Western Ghats, they cannot live anywhere else. So, the predominant found types of forests that are found on the western slopes, you have the tropical, you have the moist, broad-leaved forests, and they mostly contain rosewood, mahogany, cedar. And the eastern slopes, they have dry as well as moist deciduous forests, but they do not have these evergreen forests. They're mostly marked by teak, sal, shisham, and sandalwood trees. Can you guys guess why the western slopes have these broad-leaved, moist forests, but the eastern slopes have the dry deciduous forests? It should be like pretty evident to you, maybe, but like if it's not, we can discuss it. But can you guys guess? Can you guys take a guess of why the western slopes would have the moist forests and the eastern slopes would have the dry deciduous forests? Anybody would like to take a guess? More water availability, that is true, but how is more water available to the western slopes and not to the eastern slopes? Okay, so the Western Ghats, since they are lining the, yeah, there is a continuous range of evolution, that is okay. But what I'm looking for in the answer here is that the Western Ghats, since they're lining the west coast of India, when the southwest monsoon hits the coast, it sheds all of its moisture on the western slopes of the Ghats because it hits the mountains and it rains here. But when the clouds move on to the eastern slopes, only they do not contain as much moisture as they contained earlier. All the moisture is lost on the western slopes, and when they move ahead, they have only a little amount of rain left in them. So you must be aware of these windward and the leeward side of the mountain. The windward side would be the one that receives high amounts of rainfall and winds, and the leeward is the other side. So here, the west coast or the western slopes would be the windward side of the Western Ghats, which receive huge amounts of rainfall, and the eastern slopes would be the leeward side, which receive a lesser amount of rainfall. So the types of forest found in the ghats, in all of the ghats, the different types of forests would be the evergreen forests. There are moist deciduous forests. There are scrub jungles. There are sholas, or which are also called the sky islands, and there are the savannas, which include high rainfall savannas as well. So this map contains all these different like markings of which are different types of forests. You can look at them later when you look at the slides in your own laptops. And according to the UNESCO, at least 325 globally threatened species are found in the Western Ghats. So the Western Ghats is home to a lot of these endemic species, which right now are under the danger of extinction. You can look at it, like 50 species are critically endangered, and 145, which is a huge number, are endangered. So that is why a lot of ecologists, scientists, and conservationists are paying huge attention to the Western Ghats to save these particular species and to make these areas more amiable. But like unluckily, the Western Ghats are areas which are this is the oldest mountain range of India. They are thought to come about when India was traveling from Gondwana land towards Asia. It has thought to experience some volcanic activity, and that is when these Western Ghats have come up. And these mountains are very rich mineral resources, and a lot of mining activities happen here. And a lot of like dam building projects, this and that, occur in this area, which are harmful to these species, but they are required for the economy of the country. So this is a trade off, and that is where there is a clash between the scientists and between the government about how we're supposed to. And we need that both these sects of the society, they come together, they work together for us to save these different sorts of endangered species. So some of the endemic species are, can you guys guess? Okay, I'm going to show you some images of the endemic species of the Western Ghats. These are only a few of them which I just found the images for and put together. So can you guys guess which what are these species? Or are you guys aware of these species? Actually, is any of you from the like this area, from the Western Ghats region? No. Okay. So, like, what are your locations in India? Can you guys tell me? East India. Okay. Karnataka. And okay. So, you would know, you might know, Rajeshri, what this bird is if you are like, if you go out to bird or. Okay, so this is basically a crimson backed sunbird. This is one of the sunbirds, one of the many sunbirds. Yeah, it's one of the many sunbirds that's found in India, and this is endemic to the Western Ghats. It's a very pretty little bird, and with this striking coloration on all over its body, which is for sexual selection. Moving on, can you guess what is this? Okay, this is a blue-winged parakeet. It's also endemic to the Western Ghats. This is the lion-tailed macaque. This is the Nilgiri langur. They might look similar, but they're not. This is a langur and this is a macaque. And okay, this is a Nilgiri. I forgot. One second. Let's see. So this is the purple frog, which is also called Maveli in the local areas. This is called Nasica batrachus. This is the Nilgiri tahar. It is also endemic to the Western Ghats. It's only found here. And yes, that is the Nilgiri marten. I had forgotten its name. It's a small, uh, it's a small carnivore species, the Nilgiri marten. So these are some endemic species of the Western Ghats, but there are a lot more. If you go back to Google and search for the endemic species of Western Ghats, there are many out there, and we should take care of how to protect, how to stop habitat degradation, and how to save these species from losing their particular habitats because they basically, since they're specialists, they cannot move out of this area. Okay, one important concept on and the last concept. Yes, the white belly shola kili is a very important species of birds which is found only in the Shola Islands, and it is endangered. We should be, and people are actually working on how to, protect this particular species and to prevent it from getting extinct. Okay, another important and the last concept we're going to look at today is basically how animals are riding an escalator to extinction. So, this was an article at the Atlantic, and one of the things, interesting things it say is ain't no mountain high enough to escape climate change. So, as you might be aware, that the earth is facing a climate change, and slowly the temperatures of the land mass or the terrestrial part are rising, and as the planet slowly warms, the cooler and the higher layer of the mountains, they are also becoming warmer than they were cooler before, and now they're becoming warmer because of the global warming, and the lower latitudes are also getting warmer. So animals and plants, they're able to track these changes. They're able to feel that yes, it's getting warmer and they need to move towards ideal climates, towards cooler climates, which is why you see, it has been very clearly noted down in birds now, that you can see them trying to move on a little higher at it. They're changing their, they're shifting their ranges towards the higher slope of the mountains, and this is also, it's happening faster for animals and birds, and because they can move, but it's slowly happening for plants as well. But as you can see in this image, and as you can make it out from here, escalated to extinction, because the species in the lower ranges, they can move on to the higher ranges, but where are the species which are found at the top of the mountains gonna go? They are basically gonna go extinct because they have no place else to go. And since they have these intruders coming from the lower levels of the mountain, they may be gonna get outcompeted. Or, and this particular temperature now is more suitable for these species coming from the lower levels or coming from the lower heights, because temperature here is rising, and the species that are found in these slopes or in these heights, on these altitudes, for them the temperature is higher and they're not going to be at their best, and they're going to get outcompeted by the other species. So the species higher up in the mountains are just going to go extinct, which is why we should actually uh, try to bring down global warming, which is, I guess, not very much possible. But okay, this is another. So this is a paper which you can find at this link. I've pasted the link here for your reference. It's talking about shifting home ranges, which we discussed. So when the plants and animals, they keep moving uphill, they can also lose their habitat, because, as one of the simple reasons is because mountains are like they are shaped like that they are broader at the base, and as you move higher they get narrower. So, since they get smaller, the area available is smaller, and these plants and animals will not have enough area as they had when they were in the lower range. And the shift in range will also mean that there can be a loss in the old interactions that they had with the community that was there in the lower altitudes. So, right now, if you're living in a particular area, you will have all these different species that you're interacting with, that you have these interactions and bonds with, and you're fit in this community. You have your own role, you have your specific niche, you have your role to play. But when you move up, you don't know which new species you're going to meet there, what is your interaction going to be with them. Is it going to be a rivalry, is it going to be a partnership? This is going to be an entirely new experience for the organisms, and this could be a simple reason which can also lead to loss of species that are actually moving their ranges. And one reason that I already mentioned is, where are the species that are already found at the top of the mountain gonna go? So in this paper, this was a research done by scientists from the University of British Columbia along with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. They show how the warmer temperatures, they're pushing the mountain dwelling birds to the higher altitudes. And the study was carried out in southern Peru on the Cerro de Pandiacola. And so these species here, you can see they were earlier found around like 700 meters or till 800 meters above the sea level, but now they're expanding their range to around 11,000 meters above the sea level because the temperatures are getting higher. So this is the diagram from 1985, this is a diagram from 2017, and you can see how these species are moving up. And even for this species, which was from around 800 to 1200 meters, which was around 400 meters of altitude, it now only has around 3 to 200 meters left. And if things keep getting warmer, it's gonna go extinct. And this species here, which is the variable ant shrike, in this particular mountain, it's not been spotted any longer. It does not mean that it's gone extinct right now, because it might be found in other neighboring mountains at which are higher than this mountain or something like that. It might be found those there still, but it is locally not found in this particular mountain range. And these other birds, the common scale-backed antbird, it has expanded its range a lot because it might be a generalist, for example, but it's moving upwards because of the climate change, because the temperatures here are more suitable than here. And this versicolored barbet, its range is now shrunk by two-thirds, and these are moving upslope. It's shrunk, you can see, not only by the height but also by the breadth of the range, because here the mountain is going to get narrower. So, okay, this was all I had for today, and I have covered some of the neighboring topics to what was being covered in the lectures about biogeography, about the reasons, and about shifting ranges. So, yes, if you guys have any doubts or if you guys want to discuss anything, again, I would repeat, if you want to discuss any of the previous assignments, if you have any doubts in the quizzes, you can ask me. I am here if you want to discuss anything. And if there are no further doubts and nothing left to discuss, you can leave the meeting. Thank you. Okay, so nobody has any doubts? Okay, so I will end this meeting. Thank you for joining today's tutorial session. Okay.